When in one of his presentations, he said that if you want to know what unboredom can be, that was a nice term, what unboredom can be, then you should look at Adivasi children, tribal children. So from there, we will start. And thank you again, Jinan. Now the stage is yours. Most welcome.
Thank you. So shall I straight away start the presentation?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah. Yeah. So
you are recording, no?
Yes, I'm recording.
Okay, thank you.
Can we learn from Adivasis to build a stress-free society? That is the topic that we decided together. I added a small, byline calling it "What will prevent us from learning from them?" That's a very important question to hold. And I also want to clarify what I mean when I say Adivasis, because that all these terms are now being used in a modern Western paradigm. So I'm actually I want to talk about illiterates, their way of being. And in fact, illiterate is a term that the literates have created. So I would actually like to call them sense cognites, because they use their senses to cognize. So unlike us, who read books and books and books and then talk about all kinds of things, they're they are directly encountering the world, engaging the world, experiencing the world, and knowing is happening in a very different way, which unfortunately I don't think the modern people will be able to understand because of it. And I'll tell you the reasons. What prevents us from learning from them? One is the bias of modern humans who have considered that they are superior, they are developing, all the terms that we use: progressed, educated, developed. So already there is a fundamental bias within, in our system, which we are not even aware. And the other thing is that we also consider, we meaning actually now this is the Western people, they consider that they are the most evolved in biological terms also, biological evolution. And that completely prevents them from understanding people or learning or even understanding people whom they consider as inferior. So there is already a kind of a hierarchy established even to study or even to learn what they are all about. And I also think that there is a cognitive disability because of literacy, because of reading, because we have destroyed our biological process of learning. And, so our natural process of cognition has been replaced. And all our understanding basically is through reading and thinking and reasoning, So everything is a mind-based, language-based activity. And a wrong understanding about the cognition itself. That is why today these cognitive sciences are now talking about embodiment and 4A cognition and all that. But I think that even they won't be able to understand it, because all these are derived by thinking, not by actually cognizing. So, and I feel that the whole modernity can be understood as a cognitive crisis, because we have uprooted ourselves, alienated ourselves from our biological rootedness, which is actually the cause for body and mind. And I think it is high time we leave that poor Descartes alone, because Descartes is not the real cause for fragmentation of the body and mind. That we are only, because we are thinking that these are all intellectual ideas. We are not realizing it's an experience of the modern man, that they are fragmented, they are alienated, and actually, what I'm now talking about is what I actually redefine as cognitive dissonance. Of course, in the modern context, this cognitive dissonance has been a completely different thing. But what I'm telling is that cognitive dissonance is the body and the mind learning two different things. Because these are learning two different things. Body is imbibing the experience. Body is present. Whereas the mind is involved in reading, thinking, ideating, and the mind is always absent, because it's always in the past or future, or, whereas the body has no choice but to be present. So in fact, this is actually what is cognitive dissonance. that cognition is happening at two levels, and quite often which has no connection with each other. And I also believe that this is the reason for the appearance of time, in fact, the creation of boredom, insecurity, sense of lackness, which leads to stress, and of course, creation of egoistic, selfish, and self-centered individuals. And I think all this can be rooted to one fundamental issue, which is our alienation from our biological way of being in the world. So I like to talk about a small. I don't know whether I can dare to call it a poetry, but if you don't mind, I'll call this a poetry of mine. So knowing is the nature of life. Why one learns is to sustain life, which I think is quite commonsensical. What one learns, what is learned is species dependent. And I'm telling that all species are learning, except of course the modern educated people, because they seems to be reading and thinking they are learning, but that's not what actually learning is all about. And what each species learns is context dependent. Where and when is the context? Context dictates what to learn. Content dictates how to learn. This is a little problematic thing, because this is created by the modern cognitive crisis of human beings. So this how to learn is actually very natural, but now which has been now distorted because of the way that we have removed from our biological cognition into reading and thinking and things like that. And the bottom line is that life ensures the continuation of life. And this is basically that everything about sustainability, everything about life, it all is based on one simple thing, that life seems to be, the nature of life is to sustain life, and that's what you see all around. Exploring our biological roots. So this is what I'm trying to explore. Now, one thing I want to tell you is that when I began to explore these things around 1991, I stopped reading completely. And I found that the people who read and people who cognize directly has a completely different two systems of knowing and being. Of course, I will explain this a little bit more later, but what I want to say is that I frankly do not have any intellectual or academic interest. And I believe that it is the academic interest that is destroying human beings for not knowing what exactly is the problem. Because people seems to be ideating all the time without actually encountering what is wrong directly, without any theories in their head, So just I want to tell you, because I'm sure most of people who have joined are intellectuals and academics, and I have absolutely no interest, but I'm interested in the crisis that humanity is encountering. And so that is the only place where we can, and of course, if you're open, then we can, engage in a more open manner as to what exactly is wrong with modern life. And so why do biological beings learn? I think this is the first question that we need to ask, and this is to sustain life. That's an absolutely, without any doubt, one can say. But are we able to sustain life? Now, I'm asking about the modern humans. What are they doing with life? Why do human beings have to attend parenting workshops and read books on parenting? I think this is the most important pointer to say that something is wrong with the modern human beings, because looking after your child, giving birth, these are absolutely natural things that every other living being is doing, including the non-literate people. It is only the educated, and the more you get educated, the more alienated you are, and the more you don't know how to look after your children. So this is the crisis that I somehow find that the modern educated people don't seem to be encountering. They're always talking about the artificial intelligence they have created, the rockets that they have sent to the moon. All that is fine. But what about your not knowing how to look after your child? So, and even this, they have even problem with the whole idea of pregnancy and birth. Now it has been turned into a disease. And how come more and more people do not know about cooking, primary knowledge of health? No, because, I'm raising these issues because you go to any rural tribal area, any village, these are things that everybody in the village knows. All the fundamental requirement to lead life, that existential knowledge is something that all the illiterate people carry. And what an educated person doesn't seem to know. And the fact is that why have the modern educated people turned against life? And why do we distrust life? See, these are all pointing to the cognitive crisis of modern human beings. And I think only by addressing this, any change we can bring about. But the whole issue is that how do we engage with this? This is a question. Can we still use our intellectual, ideated, fragmented mind to engage with this? This is a question that we need to ask. So how do biological beings learn? By being in the context of learners, creating knowledge by recreating knowledge. Now, what other thing is that, that this biological, it's only through the process of biology that we can understand what is actually cognition, actual cognition. So I want to share a small video with you. Sorry. This is a 3-year-old chimpanzee trying to crack the nut, but unable to do it. So he goes to an older female, and she's carefully observing the nut cracking performance, whereas the adult is not at all in the act of teaching. And now the chimpanzee is going back and learning. Now, see, I'm telling this because the very act of teaching is anti-life, because learning is the nature of life. It's not a choice. Learning is not a choice at all. That all living beings are learning without choice. It's only when you get into reading that you think that you have choice in learning, but your senses have no choice at all. You can choose when you begin to have interest in certain things. For example, if you're interested in nature, naturally you can become attentive to nature. You can begin to observe nature. So I also want to talk about indigeneity as redefining this. Indigeneity established by rooting themselves in their respective context through the senses autonomously. I want to redefine this because now many people, PhD holders, are also calling themselves indigenous, which of course, for the sake of space, it may be true, but at the level of cognition, at the level of biology, that is not true at all. That, to me, indigeneity can only be by people who are using their senses, who connect directly to their context. That is what establishes indigeneity. To me, it is a cognitive paradigm, a category of cognition. And they are biocentric, meaning they use life-given ability to create knowledge. So indigeneity as a cognitive category, contextual, experiential, process-oriented, and I call this phenomenological, not the modern idea of phenomenology, because again, phenomenology has turned into reading more books and thinking. They've lost the actual phenomenological inquiry. That's what I find. And of course, modernity as a cognitive category is that decontextualized, non-experiential, product-oriented, and mental. Because knowledge has become a product. They are no longer in the process of knowing. And sustainability, because I want to bring in sustainability because this is something that we have completely lost. And for an indigenous community, sustainability is a way of being, as an existential fact, to sustain life, and not all life, and I mean all life, not just human beings. Whereas sustainability as an afterthought, when we have destroyed sustainability, now we are thinking about it, and that too as a very selfish idea, a narrow view of sustaining livelihood, not life. Indigenous beingness, indigenous, it is biological, which is factual, and For modern, it is mental, ideated, non-dualistic, timeless, trapped in time, sense of abundance as they own nothing. That's a fantastic paradox of all this, you know. That sense of lack after they began to own things. Living in the present and feeling security. Whereas in the modern people, they live in the future and they're constantly feeling insecure, even if they have so much things. So this is the contradiction and paradox that I'm constantly seeing. And there is actual cognitive autonomy in indigenous people. And this is cognitive dependency, even though people seem to think that they are educated and they know everything, you know. So this is the basic contradiction that I keep finding. And there is existential freedom in indigenous communities, whereas amongst the modern people, there's a fake freedom. It is the freedom that somebody owns that can be given to you. It is not an existential fact that you're born free, you know. So, and then other thing is that there is an absolute trust in life. They trust life, absolutely, unquestioningly. And modern people seems to be constantly at war with what is, you know? So a distrust of life. And all these are different paradoxes that I'm finding in the modern context. Again, indigeneity and modernity are two cognitive paradigms, as I told you. And what I mean by cognitive paradigm is two formative conditions. They create two kinds of formative conditions. One produces nature-centric people, biocentric, rooted to their context. The other produces anthropocentric people who are alienated. So, and I think the most important lesson from the cognitive sciences, which the cognitive scientists have been neglecting all the while, is that we are shaped by what we experience. If you truly understand the simple fact, I think you will close down all your schools. Because what you do in schools is that the child constantly experiences somebody teaching. Child is, and of course, through second-hand means, through reading. You know, if you truly understand what is cognition, what is how we are shaped by our context, that the fact that if the senses has to function, the child has to explore the real world, and if there has to be autonomy, none of this is taken into consideration when you look at the modern childhood, you know. And children's experience of indigenous colors. What is a child? What is a child's experience? Now, other thing that I want to say very clearly is that a child growing up in an indigenous culture retains, even when they grow up, they retain most of these qualities. But that is not the case with modern systems, you know. In modernity, every child is born with the original capacity, original possibility of being a, sense cognite, an autonomous sense cognite who can create knowledge. But if the child is placed in a modern context, the child will invariably become like the modern person who is alienated and fragmented. And I also want to, propose this idea that, as soon as a child born in the Western paradigm, taken to a rural tribal indigenous paradigm, what will happen to that child? If the child will become truly indigenous in the sense of using senses and all that, which means that it is the cognitive condition of modernity that one needs to look at. That invariably people who are born into modern conditions, what happens to them? Children are trusted and their individuality is respected. Of course, none of this is the way things are. These are not intellectual ideas. These are facts. Cognitive autonomy, as there is no teaching, no instruction, no unwanted help. You will never hear, don't do this, don't do that kind of things anytime in an indigenous community. And the other thing that I have noticed is that you will never find an adult overseeing the activities of a child, of children. Children are all the time amongst themselves, different age groups, always together and always exploring life around them. Of course, we call it play because we don't understand what is actually play. And the sense of ownership is not created, hence the feeling that everything is mine to be used. So this was very interesting. When I ran a school many years ago in Pune, this is what I found. A child was drawing in one A4 size paper. Other child came in and started drawing in the same paper. Another child. 4 children were drawing in the same paper, same picture. And there was no question of asking permission or denying permission, because that sensibility was not there at all. And all the 4 of them were drawing in the same paper. And after a point of time, the first one who was doing it left and the others continued. I found this fantastic, that this is actually the nature of the child. That the child's nature is to be, because they are already, I don't know what to say, community minded. So they have this, dualistic beingness of individuality and individual and being community held together as one being. As there is no sense of lacking, hence they are rooted in abundance. How do they get a sense of abundance, even though they don't own anything? Because all these are created systematically by modern culture, actually. And other thing that I notice is that there is nothing given to the child and telling this is yours. So nothing becomes mine. The thing with the child in the indigenous community is that everything belongs to them, because they use. When they use it, they use, as if it belongs to them. And when they don't want it, then they don't use it, it doesn't belong to them. Whereas this possessiveness is something that is cultivated in modern, And as I told you, total responsibility and ownership in action. Children are born in freedom. Children do what comes naturally to them, guided by life and in response to the context. No conflict with natural sense of time. Integral nature is retained by engaging with the world that is not fragmented. Children are observant, totally involved in what they do. And the other thing is that values and beauty are inherent in what they do. So what an indigenous person does, both are, sustainability, in terms of sustainability, it's sustainable and it is beautiful. So what they do turns out to be beautiful, because as an integral being, that is how you respond. So beauty is not an afterthought. And in modern conditions, children are distracted, individuality is negated, and children's cry for autonomy is denied all the time. Even a small child, very small child, always is trying to say, no, don't do this to me, by their actions, not through language. But they, if you overfeed them, they will spit out everything children want to do on their own. But because the parents think that they don't know, or they are in a hurry, they just impose themselves and take away the autonomy that the child is so fiercely wanting to have. Distance in life, hence, all measures are taken to protect the child from nature life. All kinds of injections given right in the beginning, the child is born, 13, 14, I think, in America. So, so there is a total distrust that life, the nature is against them. Life is against them, So you give all kinds of, injections and vaccinations. Cognitive autonomy is denied as children are taught, instructed, controlled. Sense of ownership is created. Sense of lack. I'm just telling the opposite of that, which I've almost explained in everything. Yeah. And their presence is killed because they are constantly made to depend on ready-made knowledge. And, so as I'm telling you, that in modern conditions, freedom is owned by adults, which are given in installments. Effort is required to learn. Hence, ego and reason, begins to come about. Children are treated as incapable, individuated, truncated from the whole, fragmented, compartmentalized. So this is the basic, beingness that gets cultivated when a child is brought up in a modern environment. Of course, they talk about democracy, but I think one needs to really question what exactly is democracy. That right from the childhood, if you deny a cognitive autonomy, cognitive freedom, because actually you can actually see real democracy in indigenous communities. because there is absolutely no interference in others' activities. So I have been exploring how this shift from modernity, indigeneity to modernity has happened. And to my mind, it is printing press and the production of new kind of production of new kind of cognitive condition. Of course, I have done a earlier talk with Diviraj on the impact of literacy on cognition, on your cognitive, on your beingness. I won't go too much into detail of this, but I just want to say that printing press is the reason why we have stopped using senses. We have started using reasoning as a cognitive tool to understand, and I call it reasoning creates a myth on understanding actually. So let me just take you through the impact of literacy. Literates learn the word, illiterates learn the world. That's a basic paradigm difference. And I want to correct this actually. Literates are taught the word. They don't learn on their own, they are taught. So already there is teaching that happens. And illiterates imbibe the world. Again, when we say learn, we think there is a conscious act. No. A simple example is how you imbibed your mother tongue. You did not make any effort to imbibe your mother tongue. And in some places like in Bangalore slums, children learn 4 languages like this with absolutely no effort because there are 4 languages in their context. So that's why I'm telling that context actually dictates what you learn. If you have a fantastic cultural context where actual learning is taking place, people are doing fantastic things, involved, naturally you will create children who are also, learning and creating knowledge. And the interesting thing is that literates say they learn from experience. This is very crucial to understand this. Literate learn from experience. This is what they say. But I find that in natural cognition is illiterates learn the experience. There is no time gap between experience and learning. So this, I think, is one of the places where you can actually see that a gap is created. And I believe that this is the time when time enters into your psychological beingness, because you see, otherwise there is no time gap between learning and experience, because that's one and same. But the moment you become literate, then you don't learn the experience. You'll read and read and read, and then you say you learn from experience. That's something that has happened earlier. You think about it and learn. Whereas this is absolutely not the way natural cognition takes place. And learning actually is a two-way process. What I mean is that we are shaped by what we learn. So literates are shaped by the word. That's why we are, our beingness is different. Illiterates are shaped by the world. So development of brain architecture. This is very interesting to look at. The operating system of literates are shaped by the written word. Reading, reasoning, agreeing, disagreeing, more reading, more thoughts, permutation combinations of linguistic inputs. And you create more and more ideas, and that kind of a story happens. But the operating system of illiterates are shaped by the world. So it's sensing, feeling, knowing, and being, because they seems to be living perfectly fine. So, and it's also interesting to look at many of the words that we seems to be using, without any thought, are not present at all in the, in fact, indigenous people talk very less because they are actually living. They are not discussing things; they are living actually. So naturally, boredom, teaching, learning, sustainability, freedom, waste. None of those words have any meaning there, but they are actually living it. Meaning the opposite of this. So literacy changes in a very deep manner. The nature of language changes from oral to visual. You're reading, you're using your eyes, you're no longer hearing. The nature of, this is another very interesting thing to look at. The nature of language changes from verb-centric to noun-centric. You find there are more and more nouns in the modern paradigm because we start with knowledge itself. No, modernity is engaging with knowledge, whereas indigenous communities are in knowing. That itself is the first example of verb and noun. And from contextual and democratic to decontextualized and hierarchical. I know one or two interesting examples in this is that when you go to a rural tribal area, the name of the place is always contextual. Like in Pune, I'll tell you a good example. In Pune, there is a stop called Null Stop. Because maybe that was the first water tap on the street. There is a water tap that was established maybe 50, 60 years ago, and that became Null Stop, where there is null. So this contextual process of creating name is something that was always there. Now decontextualizes when we say, we get Rajiv Gandhi Nagar or Mahatma Gandhi Road, that gets somebody imposes it on, and it is there all over, contextual names are also all over, because the water tap can be in different places, or there are many such examples. In fact, if you look at all the indigenous names, they are all contextual, and it is actually created by people. It's not a top-down process. And of course, from process-centric to ego-centric, what I'm trying to say is that, again in the language, you can see this, that when you use the, for example, when you say that I burned my finger, or I did this, I did that, is something that a modern person seems to be using all the time. They're always I-centric. Whereas in the indigenous language, it is process-centric, that you happen to be there. Mere haath jal gaya. I did not burn my finger. My hand got burned. That is so you can look at, many sentences like this. You will find that amongst the oral languages, it is always process-centric. Whereas, in the modern language, more and more you will find it is I-centric, ego-centric. So there itself, if you actually do a proper study of language, not a biased study by the modern linguists, because they are actually doing a very, very biased study, because they always think that they are very developed and they know everything. So naturally, they miss many important points. And of course, it is creating literacy actually creates a new system, neural network in your brain, which is absolutely unnatural. Of course, I mean, the people can think that is the development. That's also, we can look at that. And of course, it numbs the senses and the right brain activities. Introduces conscious reasoning as a tool to comprehend. That's the other, which is actually also the reason why that one becomes egoistic, because one gets a notion that you're creating knowledge by reasoning. In fact, all the input is given by the book. Your job is only to, put it together and, store it. So shifting from world to the world, from the realm of unknown to the known, learning as an autonomous activity, fragmentation of the body and mind, denial of process, disappearance of feminine, meaning quality, preoccupation with permanence and certainty, fear of unknown, leading to the fear of uncertainty and unknown, So I think I will just show you, and later if you're interested, you can come back to this. Otherwise, this is going to take a little bit more time. So let me just, hold this for a minute so that, for people who are interested, we'll be able to come back and take a look at this in the video. This will be uploaded, of course. This will take too much time. That's why, sorry. Let me just go to the next slide. So I actually would like to say that literates actually are under delusion of knowledge, and it's called cognitive delusion. A false belief based on incorrect inference about external reality that is firmly sustained despite what almost everybody else believes. Now, this is a definition that I got from National Library of Medicine. But actually, if you come to think about how the literates create their notions, it is very clear this is a cognitive delusion. Two examples. One example is that, just the participants, I request you to just imagine the earth. Imagine the earth, and And just tell me, what is the size of the earth that you imagined just now? What is the size? How big is it? This is what I want to ask. Or there are other option, some people actually imagine the picture of the earth, which is shot from outer space. Some people imagine that when we ask literates to imagine the earth, and the other people usually imagine the size that they imagine is that of a football, not more than that. So that, and if you actually ask an illiterate person about this, I'm sure they wouldn't be thinking of earth in that manner. It will be an immense experience of what the earth is. So this is one cognitive delusion. The other delusion that I want to say is that imagine you traveling from somewhere in the north, maybe, from the north to the south. I'll talk in terms of India, that you travel from North India, Delhi, to Kerala, which is in the south. So, and then imagine traveling from Delhi to from Kerala to Delhi. Or imagine traveling from Canada to South America, or from South America to Canada. So usually for an educated person, traveling to from north to south means they are traveling down south, because that term has now come. And when you travel to north, it is you're up north, you're going. So the cognitive realm, so your imagination is actually two-dimensional. You think as if you are going up and you are coming down. You see? In fact, what is interesting was that this actually was shared to a child, I think about 6-7-year-old child, that up north something. And the child was asking, oh, does that mean that the river is flowing from there to here? Or other friend was telling that if you keep ball in Delhi, it should roll down to Kerala. No, because that is what you say. You're up north and down south. You're going down south. So these are just two examples. There are immense examples. If you're willing to explore this, you will find that the literates are actually under cognitive delusion. And as I told you, cognitive dissonance is nothing but body imbibing the experience, mind engaging with language. This is what actually happens in the classroom. What is the body experiencing in a classroom? The teacher, the heat, whatever teacher is talking about, the anger of the teacher, the emotional response, the friends, that's the body's experience. Whereas the mind is learning the physics or whatever the teacher is trying to say, and which is not there. Whatever content she is talking about in terms of physics, mathematics, nothing is present. So you create the division there by engaging the mind with ideas that you propound, whereas the body is experiencing what is happening. So this simple fact is something that I don't know why the cognitive scientists are not able to understand. Now that is what is called fragmenting the body and mind. So please leave that poor Descartes alone and understand that this is the reality of a literate person. And this is not a philosophical issue to be solved in thinking, but to be reclaimed in experience itself by using your senses. Stop using too much of your reason, So the operating mind of the modern mind is linear, sequential, fragmented, compartmentalized, out of context, past, absent, analytical, abstract, and you deal with certainty. Now, abstract is a strange terminology. This is not true at all. I call it just mental, because abstraction, like digestion, is a process that actually happens in the natural cognitive system. And of course, if anyone is interested, you can come back to me and we can explore this. What is actually abstraction, and hence rational dealing with what is known. Now, rationality, and they celebrate reason like anything, completely forgetting that reasoning is a tool that you can only use with what is known. You can never use reasoning with unknown. So why do you hype it up so much? And actually, if you look at the history of Western civilization, it's difficult to say that, Western conditions, you find that age of reason is somewhere in the 18th century. That is 300 years after the printing press was established. Naturally, in 300 years, most people, were reading and reading and reading and thinking and reading and thinking, which means they were already dealing with ready-made knowledge, what is known. And that is the reason why reason got established, because in order for reason to function, you have to have an information. Without an information, you cannot do reasoning at all. So knowledge, production of knowledge, ready-made knowledge, is what has resulted in the development of reason, which is actually a very, very poor cognitive tool, actually speaking. Now, the nature of written language is that linear, sequential, fragmented. You can see that. The same type, compartmentalized, out of context. It is always past, absent. It's a product, it's knowledge, and knowledge brings in certainty. You can see the correlation between the nature of written language and the nature of modern mindset, you know. And what is the nature of true experience? It is non-linear, simultaneous, holistic, present, in process, self-organizing. So this is what it is, you know. This is the nature of experience, because your senses are giving you simultaneous input. And who is organizing it? Your internal being is organizing it. You are not doing it. Your body is doing it. So that's purely a biological process. Now, again, bring back mother tongue as an example of the best example of how an integrated learning process happened, because the language is nothing but description of the world. So in the context of mother tongue, you have already engaged with the real world about which the language came in. So the language did not come in separately. Language came in along with the world, and world being the primary context. And so, again, I'm just coming back to this, you know, feeling of superiority. And this is instilled subconsciously due to the feeling that, you know, that develop, you know, progress, all this kind of terminology that we have, you know, these days. So, and modernity has clearly misunderstood children, knowledge creation process, and what constitutes knowledge. And of course, the very process called living, what is to be, what is life. Yeah? And so what I did was that from 1991, I began to document children. I began to learn from children. I just began to document everything that they do spontaneously and naturally. And of course, the detail of this I won't be able to share with you. But just to say that, you know, I've actually clearly understood the grammar or the system that is given to human beings to understand the real world. And that happens to be the form, function, process, materials, and structure in the context of their lives. So for children, this is what we need to understand. So let me just take you through what I call as implicit knowledge creation is something that is happening without your choice. Let me just take you through one simple video. So you can see, the natural conditions, unknown, real world, no ready-made knowledge, no teaching. Naturally, that learning process is getting developed. Knowledge creation is happening. Comprehension is happening. The child is a scientist. He's doing mathematical calculations. They're understanding physics, of course, with no names, no tags. And natural cognitive abilities are getting developed. Intelligence, creativity. See, creativity is another word completely hijacked by the modern people, because to them, creativity is a permutation combination of what is known. Actually, creativity basically means responding to the unknown. But in the context of modernity, unknown has been completely taken away. So they have to then redefine it that it is within the context of known, where they create little bit of unknowns. So what has actually happened, if you can, define modernity, you can say that that reasoning has taken over, and it has created the boundary of known within which your creativity happens, within which spontaneity happens, within which unknown is given some space, And for the indigenous communities, exactly the opposite. Reasoning is something, a small part of this whole cognitive process. So anyway, So what I want to insist is that naturally, how we learn and what we learn are biologically bound. The tools, qualities, attitudes, skills, everything is dictated by biology. So there is something that is inherent in you, And the outer context is what that gives you the data. For example, a child living in Russia will learn Russian, France will learn, French, Germany will learn German. So that's how it is. The context actually provides what to learn. A child living near the desert will learn rules and regulations and life about how to live in a desert. So it's a very, very contextual actually. Nature of the child, we are beings of nature. Nurtured and sustained by her. Natural rights are rights of children bestowed by life itself to sustain life. Cognitive right is the most fundamental right, which is the right to cognize the world as per nature's intent. Children are born in freedom. They are born in truth. They trust life unconditionally. So I think, what I suggest is that we need to explore children the way we explore cells to understand life. So in order to understand human beings, we need to actually revisit children. But again, how do we revisit is another question. Can we go with the same mindset, mindset of a superior being wanting to help children, and also of, I don't know whether that will help at all. So what is now happening is that what is happening in modernity is, so let me read this. Natural children, all children are born with instinct to create knowledge autonomously wherever they are born. In illiterate communities, this gets awakened and developed. In modern context, children get engineered. So what is an engineered child? Two things are impacting children's development. One is the cognitive autonomy is being denied due to teaching, instructing, helping, and they are misled from the real world to a description which is distorted, simplified, and miniaturized. So let me, let me just show you one video and stop this now. So I want to share with you what I call as the paradox of modernity. I have a video to share. Let me just share the sound also. Share sound. Okay. I hope now you will be able to hear.
One can look at the story of computer science and think we have at least three ages. One is the age of programmers. In the age of programmers, you have to pay very smart people quite a lot of money to make some system behave in an intelligent way. We are now in the age of labelers, in which you pay a lot of people not much money in order to label data. And both of them, especially this one, is n going to infinity, number of labeled data going to infinity. But of course, children don't have big data. We really would like to be able to show one car and one plane to a child, like we do for a child, and then they're able immediately to generalize very well. So our ideal is n going to 1, and to have computers that learn like children from experience.
So now this is the paradox that I'm talking about. Now the modern scientists are trying to develop artificial intelligence by learning children, because they understood that children are the most intelligent beings, and because that is, and it is in childhood that the whole system gets developed. But the tragedy is that, and also you find that there are so many universities in the West now, studying children, but completely in a lab-like environment, and they are missing it completely. It's like this, that if you want to understand the nature of dog, there are 4 or 5 options. One, of course, is the usual option by most people. They will read a book on dogs and take their PhD on that. The second option is that, which is what most people, the next group of people do, to study the pet dogs in their house, because that's very convenient. You read and take your PhD on that. Now, the third option is, of course, is slightly more difficult, which is to observe this dog in the street and try and learn. So what do they do? And the best option is to go to the jungle and wait, without creating a lab-like environment, just learn them in their context, So naturally, that is the only way to understand what is the true nature of a dog. Similarly, if you truly want to understand children, you have to go to indigenous communities where there is absolute cognitive autonomy. I hope it is still there because the education and modernity has invaded every place. So I'm not sure whether anything is left now. But even then, that the only way is to learn children if they have total cognitive freedom and the context for their awakening to the processes of life. So this is what is happening. Scientists from MIT and various institutions are learning about how children learn autonomously to develop artificial intelligence, meaning machines capable of learning autonomously and using the very same tools to dumb them down. This is what is happening actually, and they will teach you ABCD. That is the whole tragedy of all this, So what I'm actually telling is that we need to re-understand what is understanding. And what I say is that in the modern context, reasoning short circuits comprehension. You create a delusion that you have understood through reading. In fact, actual understanding is something that happens to you, is not something that you can do. So I will actually end this with, a great German poet, leave the questions now. That's the, of course, I don't know whether this is the name, but I thought that's the right name as far as this presentation is confirmed. I want to beg you as much as I can, dear sir, to be patient towards all that is unresolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves like locked rooms and like books that are written in a very foreign tongue. Do not seek the answers which cannot be given to you because you would not be able to leave them. And the point is to leave everything. Leave the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. So don't be in a hurry, modern people. You just have to give up. Your arrogance and your feeling that you've conquered. Be humble. So I've been doing something called indigenous parenting, where I'm trying to get people to start using their senses. Stop depending upon, books and theories and all that, and stop depending on me also. Just learn from children. Learn from children. Simple, because their life. And also, this is another interesting thing. You can only learn life from life, not from books. If you truly want to understand natural cognitive process, learn by cognizing naturally, not through reading. That is the reason why this whole drama about embodiment and 4E cognition, all these are absolute nonsense because it is again created by the mind. So I'm also keen to, conduct what is called as natural cognition. These are not discussion oriented, but something that one needs to hold together as a process. So this is my number. If people are interested, they can connect. And so that's how it is. So this is something that I'm just writing, because today what you find is that there are so many coaches all around, they are coaching life coaches, that coach, this coach, and I can tell you, beware of the coaches. They are the worst actually, because the coach is the one who has completely misunderstood life. Because have they understood life's process, they will stop coaching, because life is existing in every one of us. So please, coaches, stop coaching.
Thank you very much, Jinan. And definitely, like always, but this one was perhaps all that I've heard from you. This was, I must be thankful. I'm fortunate enough that it was perhaps one of the best presentations for us, for me personally, and of my friends and my, say, course participants. Definitely, they will come forward and ask their questions. So questions are now invited. And definitely, I would request Charles Rono from Kenya. That's important for me because he's also working on indigenous community. And then we can see, perhaps, I guess, that there's these geographical boundaries, how unimportant they are, because the kind of experience and uselessness of the modern language, words of modern language, how useless they are, how much, say, of lesser value they are when we approach these communities. This will be confirmed again from the other parts of the world as well. So before we start into move in this direction, you can ask a question directly.
I think Sanjay has just opened.
Of course, yeah.
Adivasis,
Okay, Sanjay. Gilbert also.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, let's
Just
just
once
let
Gilbert,
Sanjay
just
ask.
wait. Yeah.
It's a very interesting question, a very interesting presentation.
Yeah.
And I feel that it is good to learn from the Adivasis, the indigenous people, and also from children, definitely, because that is the purest state of human existence, I suppose. I mean, that is the original state of human existence. But you see, the concern which I have is that, you are valorizing experience and denigrating reason. Actually, the whole of enlightenment and modernity, everything came out of reason, rationality. That was the most important thing, no? And we have actually overcome a lot of superstitions, a lot of evil practices through reason. Reason was also a very liberating force. So if you go to Habermas, he says that modernity is an unfinished project. There is a lot that modernity can still offer. Yeah, that's the way, so this is the concern. So this is a very one-sided kind of presentation.
Oh, let me just, can I respond?
I have not completed my thing. Let me just complete. So learning is actually condensed experience, which is imparted to the learners. So I can say in that way. But you will say that it is denying autonomy to the individual person or the children. But you see, even you yourself, when you spoke about modernity as cognitive dissonance, then you are actually engaging in abstraction, pure abstraction actually. Okay, this is abstraction.
Not against abstraction. I'm not against abstraction.
Yeah, you are doing abstraction. So see, when Plato...
Not against abstraction. So let that be corrected.
Plato's understanding about education was, I mean, to my limited knowledge, it was that, you should go from the concrete to the abstract. Concrete to the abstract. And first you learn geometry and
Gilbert,
things like that.
Focus on questions. You see, what I'm telling is that because if we are talking too much, I won't be able to answer. See, one thing I want to tell you, the three things. Let me just respond to your three things that I've understood. Just give me a minute.
No, just one more thing, and I'll stop it. Okay, that is, see, when we focus on modernity rather than on hierarchical societies, the problem of hierarchical societies like capitalism, feudalism, and so on, then there is a problem actually, because you see,
no, please question now, because if you see the problem, let me just finish now, and then you come back.
Yeah,
give me a minute, because I forget everything that I have to answer. Please.
So why don't you look at say capitalism, which is
no. Okay, understood. Let me now respond.
Rather than looking at
please let me answer now, because the more you question you ask, I will forget everything. Please give me a minute.
Yeah,
I think you see the problem is that everything in modernity, including capitalism, Marxism, any ism is a product of modernity. So there is no way, whether it is modern, postmodern, constructivism, everything belongs to what I call as modernity. And the other thing that I want to tell you is that, please listen now. Don't interfere in between. Now, you see, the thing is that abstraction is a process that happens naturally, and I'm challenging that modern people understand even what is abstraction. Because abstraction is, then again, the third thing that you talked about is Plato's thing about from concrete to abstract. What I'm claiming is that in modern education, there is nothing concrete. Don't say, that geometry is concrete. That's absolute nonsense. Geometry itself is an abstraction. So the first that you use your senses to connect with the real world, from which you abstract. Your very understanding of mathematics actually should come from your actual engagement with the world. So what I'm trying to say is that you people don't even understand what is abstraction. Let me tell one more thing that you mentioned about superstition. I claim that it is the modern educated people who are absolutely superstitious because they've changed their superstitions to science. What is now happening is that everybody is believing in science. There is, don't think that you have just taken a PhD and you're become a scientist. You can count on your finger actual people who have used their senses and understood anything in modernity. What modernity creates is cognitive parasites and cognitive slaves. And of course, they talk about everything, about abstraction, all that, without understanding what is abstraction, without understanding what is superstition. What is superstition? Blind belief. It doesn't matter whether you believe in science, Newton, Einstein, or you believe in God. So that is one thing I want to say. And now you see, this is the problem. When you have too many things to say, then I forget what So, but anyway, I think we shouldn't get into too much of a this thing here. If you're truly interested in understanding the things that I'm talking about, please come back to me once again. Because I think we should now do only a trailer base of, in a trailer manner. Let others also, Sanjay had raised his hand. Let me just go to Sanjay now. Gilbert, if you're interested, please come back. We will, have a...
Okay.
I think Gilbert should be given a second chance because his question was complete. But before that, we'll go back to Professor Sanjay Kumar Sharma ji. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sir, namaskar. And, I'm really privileged to be part of this discussion. And despite having been a professor, as also a volunteer, having worked with Adivasis, what we call Adivasis or tribals in Jharkhand and West Bengal, I feel privileged to be part of this lecture. And, I think I'll re-educate myself and relearn.
Little louder, please.
And I'll recontact both.
Yeah, voice is... Yeah.
I shall. It has been a revelation for me, Amir Saab and Jinan ji, that and wonderful that I feel lucky that I've been part of this lecture, and I shall recontact you. And I think my re-education, despite having been a professor for years and a volunteer in tribal area in India, will have to restart. My education will have to restart. Thank you very much for being here and for educating. Thank you.
What is the subject that you are teaching, sir?
I have been a civil engineer, a professor, administrator, as they call it, and a mentor to many students. I used to have around 4,000 students being mentored in an engineering college. I was the director in charge of mentoring, but then my own mentoring has been started by Jinan now. Thank you for being here.
In Jharkhand, you were at some college.
Jharkhand, I worked as a volunteer. I mean, after my education from IIT BHU and IIT Roorkee, I went to Jharkhand to start working with the tribals there. So, yeah, I mean, I was just relearning many of the things. But then I guess I have to learn much more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for starting a wonderful dialogue. Yeah.
So I think we'll go back to Gilbert. But before that, do you have any other question?
Hello?
Yeah.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Amir, for extending this invitation. It is really a great pleasure to have been part of this conversation, a conversation which somebody has decided to rebrand it as revelation. I have a question because I was so much attuned to the concept of indigenous indigeneity. And according to our speaker, he talks about, the need to contextualize the knowledge. And in that sense, I want to believe that, he talks about, the idea on how maybe we can just undertake our research right from the field. And I don't know, because you also mentioned something to do with, cognitive parasites, some scholars and researchers being, cognitive slaves, because maybe they are not able maybe to go to the field and undertake their research. Now, I have a question then, that, we are living in the world because even right now, I'm also planning to do some kind of research, but fortunately or unfortunately, part of my research I have to conduct it through the internet. And also I have to do this kind of research where I'm supposed to read some literary text that have been written about a particular community. And if I understood what he did say is that, there are about 4 ways on how we can understand a dog. One, maybe you can read a book written on dogs. Secondly, we can study pets, and you can study pets that we have. And thirdly, we can observe dogs in street. And the very last one is, which is very important, is that we can go to the jungle and we study these dogs. I think that is where, we have the context where we can study the indigenous, maybe the indigenous community. Now that if in case we don't have, this particular context, like maybe for me, I have decided that perhaps I would like to do to read some of the literary texts written about the indigenous community that I would like to study. I don't know if, I will still be, branded as the cognitive parasite, as a cognitive slave, or how will it be? Having in mind that, sometimes, the kind of research or the kind of indigenous communities that we want to study, we may not be having, some, concrete access to this kind of communities. I don't know, what are your thoughts, Professor Jinan?
Is it possible to just ask in one sentence? Too many things you said, I didn't hear also properly. Is it possible? Divyaraj, were you able to listen?
I couldn't understand him, because his question, but one thing that really struck me, that he was talking about this context and the dogs in the forest. That's the proper context. But this term, being cognitive parasite, is perhaps for all the knowledge workers, including myself, it's perhaps, is it appropriate, or the question of appropriateness of these terms, like all the knowledge workers, academics?
Unfortunately, I have to say,
doing research work.
Is that the question?
But just one second. Was that right? No, was it right the way I tried to reword it? Was it
yes,
okay?
It is. Yes, it is. It's okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Because perhaps this term cognitive parasite is too merciless or too much for, and I have definitely nothing personally against that. Rather, I would say that I like that term, but it does hurt.
I just, we need to hurt. I'm purposely hurting, because unless you're hurt, unless your ego is inflated, you will not rethink at all, because you're always under the impression that you're more PhDs and you understand everything. But I'm finding that no, you don't understand anything. If had you understood, you wouldn't have created a world like this, which is destroying, which is anti-child, anti-life. We wouldn't be creating at all. So I think there is a fundamental crisis of modern knowledge itself. That is what I'm trying to challenge. I'm not challenging one or two people. I am telling that how reasoning became a tool of cognition, which is the fundamental crisis, because reasoning is, and I'm actually trying to look at the biology of cognition. How do biological beings cognize? You just have to, look at the crisis by just look at the cognitive sciences research that has been happening in the last 50, 60 years. You look at the whole tragedy of that research paradigm. First of all, the need for cognitive science as a profession came in after they decided to create intelligent machines. Number one. Then the whole idea was that cognition is a mental process. So they went around doing all kinds of things, researching on mind, computation, this, that, Then recently now they are talking that, body is important. So embodiment became one thing. Then they started talking about how many, first they began with probably 1E, 2E, 3E. There are 4 E's. There could be more E's now. It's like the LGBTQ, ABCD, it's like that. So you create all these strange ideas in the head, without actually understanding anything. Now, you also look at one simple thing, that how indigenous knowledge has been completely appropriated in the modern Western universities. You know, indigenous knowledge is something that they have not understood at all. Have they understood it, they would have actually looked at the process called cognition. What is the cognitive process in an indigenous community? No, you're only interested in knowledge that they create, because that then you can appropriate and make more money. Why is the sudden interest in indigenous knowledge came about? Because you can actually now pirate the knowledge and create more products out of it. You are never ever interested in the process that led to creation of sustainable knowledge. So this, I have severe objections to the whole modern paradigm, which I don't think there is, any, and I think, reasoning, again, I want to insist that reasoning is the very low tool of cognition. It has actually, of course, it is what has created all the, what is that we are seeing today, but that would have happened even otherwise also. Even without reason, you could have done that, provided you wanted that. So I don't think that, because I think, if you actually, I have another, I won't have time to talk about this, but I have actually started exploring what is metacognition in the context of indigenous communities. What is cognition, which I call as implicit knowledge? Then what is metacognition? How do you understand what you have already cognized? So I don't want to confuse you further, but these are things that needs absolute fresh research. Absolute fresh research. Because the more you get trapped into the modern definitions, you will not be able to get out at all. You have to actually redefine every term based on the biology of cognition, which is sense-based, which is experiential, which is contextual, So,
I mean, perhaps I can, I'm reminded of one, there was one observation made by Jinan while discussing how do the children play. So his position is, so to say within quotes, his position is that if you give toys to children, you actually, it's a kind of, you do not actually let them evolve themselves in their own way, because children do not need toys, products. Children play, that's the process. The process itself is ignored. Therefore, toys are the, so to say, biggest enemies of this playful spirit of the children. In that sense, he focused more on not the products, but this process of learning. So that was also one very important observation that might help us again, what perhaps he's trying to say when he's not trying to attack any individual personally. He's trying to question the whole project, and we have definitely discussed many other things, that it's not only, everywhere he uses modern, I use the term civilization. It shouldn't be necessarily Western civilization. All civilizations were based on, destruction of nature. All civilizations were based on domestication of animals. All the civilizations were based on slavery of women. Civilization was, so that's one point of difference. But let us go back to
Gilbert.
Definitely we can continue our discussion, but it's not something that's how I understood it. No?
Yes.
And it's good that we disagree, that this kind of disagreements are more fruitful than useless agreements. No?
So,
and we need those kind of discussions. And it's good that you came out directly. And also Gilbert, I would thank him personally, because these are the questions that remain important, especially the question of hierarchy that Gilbert raised. And he has also posted his questions in the chat box.
I will respond from there.
Yeah, but let's, before going to Gilbert, I would again request other participants.
Yeah, I think, Divya.
Yeah.
Sorry, let me just respond to this, because, see, there is one very important point that he has completely misunderstood. This is actually the cause for most misunderstanding. Because what he's telling is that, are you not valorizing experience?
Mm-hmm.
What I'm telling is there is no experiential validity in modern knowledge. That is precisely the thing I'm talking about. Because experience, unless you use your senses, there is no experience. What I am claiming is that modernity is what is valorizing experience, because they have no use of experience at all. They bracket experience and they learn from experience. They are not learning the experience, which is very different. Now, what is experience? unless your senses are functioning, there is no experience. And you have actually, modernity has denied the use of senses. So who is actually valorizing experience? It is modernity. I am insisting that it is actually experience that is a source of knowledge. Which, even though modernity talks about, which of you has actually used experience to say whatever you're talking about? That's what I'm asking. And when he mentioned about, that Plato talking about concrete to, abstract, what did you actually understand? Where is the concrete in your experience? So what I'm trying to say is that this is the reason why I find even phenomenology is going wrong, because now phenomenology has now become a mental gymnastics. Actually, they will read what that Heidegger, or that Frenchman, what's his name, Merleau-Ponty, what they have spoken about, and you keep talking about. You experience is something that you have to do, that you are in experience. You become aware of your experience, and maybe, if necessary, talk about it. But that's not how now phenomenology is taking place. So what I'm trying to say is that there is a complete misunderstanding about what constitutes experience. That's why I talked about, what I talked about as cognitive dissonance. The cognitive dissonance is that by denying your sensory experience, your experience, and by focusing on the mind, you're actually creating a cognitive dissonance, because the body is experiencing whether you're aware or not. But the mind is actually engaging with the written text. So whatever Plato wrote, you will write, you will read about it, but you don't know what is experience. You don't even know what is abstraction. So what I'm trying to say is that in order to understand what is abstraction, concretely, you have to go through the process of abstracting yourself. And that begins with rooting yourself in the experience. So the whole misunderstanding is what constitutes experience. Your experience is important, or Plato's experience is important? This is where we have to question. We deny our experience, we hang on to Plato's experience, and we talk about education. This is the problem, cognitive parasitic behavior I'm talking about. That, you see, the thing with biology is that you have to recreate knowledge. There is no relay race. You cannot pass on knowledge. There is an absolute myth that modernity is creating. But you can create geniuses only by the system that I'm talking about. Because today, if you look at the whole mediocrity that is happening all around the world, the reason is education itself. Because you do not know what is cognition. When, in tradition, if ever you have created geniuses, it is because right from childhood, they were experiencing knowledge right from childhood. So they develop a cognitive process system that is natural, that is involved, that has the ability to metacognize, that has to. So whatever genius that you have produced in tradition, they all belong to the paradigm that I'm talking about. Even you take actually Newton. I can tell you that Newton actually belonged to the paradigm I am talking about, because that it's not that one apple that he saw that made him understand that there is some force that is pulling the apple down. He must have been observing apples and different things, not just one apple. So he was a person in experience, observing everything that is happening around him. Through that exploration of that paying attention to what is happening around, that is what has made him metacognize and ask this question that why are things falling down? The problem is
this debate is, sorry to interrupt you, because we are again this time poverty and tyranny of time that we wanted to underline again. And definitely this debate must continue. Differences must be there. I mean, we shouldn't try to hide our differences. Exactly opposite. We should try to bring it forth and discuss it as much as possible, and definitely also in a new way of discussion, because that was also an interesting point when you mentioned that these terms don't have any meaning for indigenous people, for example, sustainability or boredom, or including discussion. So, but before that, I would definitely request other members or other participants, because the questions by Gilbert, they remain relevant and important. So does anyone have any other question? And then we'll go back to Gilbert again. And if everybody agrees, we'll continue. Yeah.
Divaraji,
Of course. Yeah.
may I speak a few words?
Of course. Of course. That's why we are here.
First of all, I'd like to thanks Gilbertji. He described his submission very nicely. But I would like to say one thing, that everything cannot be rejected, you see, with the prejudices. That is not correct. He referred the Plato and other. Plato is to me, Plato is controversial. He created. He was created for graded, so a concept of graded society, for graded society. And even Socrates, method of Socrates was dialogue. Mr. Gilbert is rejecting everybody. It is not good, so good. Second question, second thing, Mao Zedong discovered, and he written on his, you see, the common contradiction, in his famous article, that how experience become the experience, the senses, repeated sense can become the experience, and experience can become the logical. So that is the process, and and all these experiences can be the logical by testing and repeated testing on all these. So what I am in my mind, what I think, even today, everybody then in Jharkhand, in that Adivasi area, Indian Adivasi area is divided into 7 or 6 states. A few days back, the Hemant Soren was toppled and you see put into the jail. And the Kashmir divided into 3 union territory, and they are all Adivasis. So what is the alternative then? So these are the things, all and all ideologies, all knowledge. If one reject, you see that some prejudice. So I think that is not correct.
Thank you.
This is the time to learn, you see, with patience. Everything's to be examined with patience.
Yeah.
So that is my observation.
Thank you. Thank you. So this is the last, say, 5 minutes, and then we'll have to wind up because Jinan has to go to some other session. But definitely, these are the last precious 5 minutes. Jinan, would you like to say something? And you have the questions of Gilbert as well, also in the chat box. You might have seen, and other participants. Yeah.
No, I think it is high time we question everything that we are everything that because I read his Gilbert's this thing. I think it is very important to re-explore some of this, not through too much reading, thinking, but actually dropping that and directly start experiencing something, because there is the whole confusion in modernity is that because I find that the modern people seems to be telling that they are using senses, but you tell me, where are they actually using in the classroom? Do they use senses at all in the context of classroom? All the so-called knowledge that is coming in is through books. So where is the senses being used to cognize? So I think this is the most fundamental thing they have not addressing, and and I think we also need to look at the most of the celebrated ideas of modernity, whether it has actually been helpful at all, because I think just if you look at just pregnancy itself, you will find that it's just a mess they are making of pregnancy, turned it into a disease. So I think one by one, if you take you will find all the myth of how modernity has been actually progressing, you know. I mean, I don't agree with that at all, because, you know, the kind of destruction that you see around doesn't prove that at all, actually. So,
okay, then thank you very much, Jinan. And definitely questions are there, and it's good the way you put it in the poem of Rilke. So this German poet, Austrian poet, that we should also leave the questions now. So that was a nice conclusion. That, or somebody else put it also more beautifully. I don't know that it's not, the point is not that what the answers are, the roots of the problems are in the questions that we raise. And the questions that were raised till now, that we can see that he's tried to point out the limitations of the questions, and now he's focusing on the limitations of modern civilization. And education civilization in itself, development in itself. So thank you once again, and we'll have you again, and then everybody is most welcome, because next semester